So you're on.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Creating Resilience for Challenging Opportunities web series. Today is on the power of language. We're so thrilled for you to be watching. Please share this out and invite your friends to participate. We love having questions. After next week, we have one last webinar, which is going to be on When Silence Heals. And after that, we're switching to a roundtable format, which will be more a discussion between all participants. We welcome your topics, anything that you'd like to see. We'd love to hear from you. And we are going to be having about 8 panelists each time. So that's what's upcoming. We're thrilled to get started, and I'm going to take it back to Dorit, our wonderful moderator.
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Today's topic is near and dear to my heart, as are all of them, because I chose them. And today's topic is language. This is what I've done a lot of studies. I have a lot of degrees, but the thing that I really enjoyed the most was studying linguistics, neurolinguistic programming, and nonviolent communication. That, to me, covered my entire life because that affects every aspect of our being, in my opinion. So I will started by asking Dave to please introduce himself, or whatever he wishes to do. Dave,
Hello.
you're on.
Before I start, I'm still hearing a little interference. I'd like to request
Yes,
that
Dave,
everyone mute themselves but
yes.
me. Okay. Thank you. So hello, everyone. I'm grateful to all of you who are turning in to hear what we all have to share with you today. My name is Dave Rubin. I support organizations, activists, and other leaders in becoming more effective leaders and communicators so they can have a bigger impact. I also help people in conflict to be able to hear each other and connect with each other so that they can come up with solutions that work for everyone. So I believe that in our culture, we have learned to judge people in terms of right or wrong, good or bad, smart or stupid, pretty or ugly, and in terms of whether or not they are deserving of punishment or reward. So that's true of how we've learned to judge other people. I think it's also true of how we've learned to judge ourselves. I think this way of judging and thinking can be very objectifying. We tend to think of ourselves as objects full of shortcomings. We tend to assign unchanging concepts as to what we are, as if we're an inanimate object. So just as we see a chair as being made of wood, we may see ourselves as being a good person or a bad person, etc. When something else that can happen that can bring to even more pain, I think, is when we start comparing ourselves to other people. We might look at somebody else and say, oh, she's prettier than I am. He's more athletic than I am. She is so much more successful than I am. I think this way of judging and thinking is very static. It makes change very difficult. Worse, I think it leads to self-loathing and depression. So I believe the solution is not to stop judging. We need to make judgments in order to take care of ourselves and make decisions in life. Instead, the solution I see is to shift the way we judge to one that evaluates actions and intentions in terms of what serves life and our values. When we do this, we focus our attention on what we are feeling, wanting, and needing. I believe this shift can be profoundly liberating. We can get so much clearer on what we want. And when we are clear on what we want, we can make conscious choices as to what we are going to do to serve our needs and values. So this is a much more dynamic way of thinking, I think. I think the reality is life is dynamic and ever-changing. Our feelings change from moment to moment. The needs that come up for us change from moment to moment. And when we are clear on what we want and what we are going to do about it, change in our life becomes possible, even inevitable. Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. And now we will have our next special guest today, who's Tara Gardner. Tara, welcome to the webinar.
Thank you. Hello, everybody. I loved what Dave said. I just am so in alignment with everything that Dave just shared. And I'm very happy to be here with you all today about creating resilience through language. My name is Tara Gardner. I'm a communications coach in San Diego, and I specialize in something called NVC, nonviolent communication. This is what the book looks like. I also taught communication with the community college district for more than 20 years. So I am thrilled to share with you how this simple little 4-step communication process can radically contribute to creating resilience. Resilience is about staying internally empowered. And yes, we keep ourselves fit and empowered in many ways with diet and exercise, meditation, etc. I'd like to focus here on how language is foundational in staying empowered and resilient. I'd like to consider that the power of language, the power of words cannot be overstated. How we use words internally in our own minds and then externally in the way we interact with others not only can impact our experiences of reality, but can actually shapeshift and generate our experiences of reality. So, what's the purpose of communication? It's to get needs met, to serve life, to support life through the use of words. Words are symbols for things. They're not the thing itself, yet because of their repeated association, they're experienced as if they are the thing itself. It's like, I'd actually like to take you on a little experience. Here we go. I want you just to imagine that you love apple pie and someone just came into the room with the most incredible homemade apple pie just popped out of the oven. It's piping hot, it's steaming. You can see, you can smell the fresh cinnamon and apples, sweet apples. They're putting it on the counter right next to you. They're slicing a big slice for you. You can smell it all. And then all of a sudden they scoop a big plop of ice cream on top and it's melting. And just imagine now they're actually handing you the plate with a fork and they say to you, okay, go ahead now, dig in. Just imagine taking a big bite of that piece of apple pie. What's happening in your mouth right now? Is your mouth watering? I'm guessing for many of you it might be. You're having a visceral body reaction within seconds just because of some words. There's no pie here. It's just words which have created the experience of your mouth watering. So please consider this food for thought. Thoughts are food. And just like we make healthy food choices, it behooves us to make healthy word choices because we will have these bodily reactions to words like we just demonstrated with our mouth when our mouth was watering within seconds. And then think about the other extreme when we'll have reactions to words that we might not even be aware of. Stressful, negative, violent words will produce stress-releasing secretions, cortisol, adrenaline. It takes a toll on our health and well-being and, of course, our inner resilience. So I look forward to sharing with you more about the power of language in creating inner resilience. Thanks.
Thank you, Tara. Vanessa, is there anything that you need to add from the audience members or you personally?
No, not yet. Well, Johnny Martinez says, like, the cycle of life is actually a cycle of death. When someone says this sucks, but I never known sucking, all kinds of odd wordings that don't seem accurate. Okay, yeah, for sure. I wanted to say that I remember as a child hearing the old expression, sticks and stones will may hurt my bones, but your words will never hurt me, or something like that. And I remember as a child thinking, but this cut on my knee is going to heal. But when my parents or a peer would say something really hurtful to me, like the time my mother said to me that she felt sorry for the man who married me when I was a kid because I was being tiresome, asking too many questions. I still remember that. That is something that, you know, I've made a relationship with and processed, but it was far more hurtful to me, those words, than any push, shove, break that I've had, and with far longer lasting consequences. And I think about the ways we say somebody's mouth is going to get them in trouble, as if this mouth is something that can deliver something so potent that who knows where it will lead to. And I think there's kind of like some our wonderful Tara and Dave Rubin. By the way, Dave Rubin, happy birthday. Just wanted to wish you a happy birthday. It's Dave Rubin's birthday today. You're welcome. As they were both alluding, in terms of language, I became a literature major and then a psychotherapist because I recognize how potent they are in ways that they discussed in terms of creating resilience, in terms of judging, hurting others. The words we use as a vegan, I think about some of the expressions, killing 2 ways to skin a cat, or killing a bird with 2 birds with 1 stone. These very violent images that then normalize violence. They normalize the violence that we do to animals. And so I think that language is something that is ever present and is how we make meaning and how we connect with each other on deeper levels, whatever kind of language that is, whether verbal or not. And we all have different kinds of language, but I think that when we underestimate the importance of it, or we minimize it saying, oh, it was just a joke, as if you can diminish the power of words by not taking responsibility for them, and then your responsibility goes away, I think we do ourselves and each other a grave disservice. And I'm thrilled to discuss more with 2 people who are both Tara and Dave are really skilled with nonviolent communication. I know they've both studied that. I can't wait to learn more and to hear more about the potency of language and when we use it in ways to heal and to connect and to reach out to others.
Thank you, Vanessa. So we would like to, at this point, ask certain questions. I don't know if you have any from the audience members. I would like to, before we go into that, just go back to what Tara said before about internal empowerment. And I think it's not a term that's very much used, and most people do not think of empowerment as coming from us internally, and yet our language betrays us. Our language betrays us all the time, because language is a tool for communication, as Tara said, but words are the vehicle by which we use to communicate how we feel about ourselves, our own selves, vis-a-vis whatever circumstance, situation, or person with whom we are interacting at the time. And so I think the words that we use are not just critical, but we need to be mindful about them. For example, I think I see a lot of people, I think many people have reason to be very angry right now in the United States. I do. However, what is the language that's being used to express the reason for that anger? Most people are using curse words. They're using the language of violence. And yet they maintain that they don't want any more violence. So they're using the language of violence to stop the violence. It doesn't happen. All you're doing is perpetuating it. So if you find yourself using curse words and you're swearing, I remember reading somebody on Twitter once who said to somebody else who had spoken about almost every other word in the tweet was pretty strong, violent language and was cursing. And I remember feeling so much pain for her that she didn't get it. She thought she was being censored. And I thought, well, because she's coming from a place inside of being censored. And so because her language was betraying her, because her response to that tweet, that's what it showed to me. And I thought, because there's so much on the outside that allows us to believe or that fits our own belief system, that we're powerless. If it fits our own belief system, because that's what language is. Language betrays us because it shows our own belief system. And I think what we need to start doing is being very mindful about the language. So I'm going to go back to the anger that is so prevalent right now in the United States. And I think there needs to be anger in the United States, but how we express it and what we do with it will determine the outcome. So when I personally am angry, I get very mindful about my thoughts and the language I see that's decorating my thoughts. And also I look at the words that come right after each other. I stop. I actually practice this. I've practiced this since I was a child. And that's why I went into linguistics, and that's why I studied nonviolent communication, and that's why I studied neurolinguistic programming, because I was so fascinated with this. Because what I did as a child, and I still do today, is the minute I get angry, I listen to myself, to the language I'm using. Not what's behind the anger, but I listen to the language, because the language takes me directly to what's behind the anger. And I then address the reason that I believe I'm angry with kind thoughts, with words that are words of tremendous beauty and poetry. And when I do that, it is incredible, because immediately the anger dissipates, and all I see is the problem, not vis-a-vis me, but I feel like I'm outside looking on to the problem. And that's the power of language. So the language with which we respond will determine the outcome. And that's what I mean by that. Does anybody else wish to continue this conversation that's going this way? So please unmute yourself and come on. And Dave, you were first to raise.
Yes, I like what you said. I think anger. I think what causes anger is causes lingering anger. At least this person is racist, or these kind of thoughts. Those kind of thoughts cause anger, and that can really serve us anger can really serve us if we use it as a tool to recognize that we're thinking in a way that doesn't serve life. We're thinking in a way where we're seeing people as enemies. And then when we get that reminder, then we can shift our thinking. Okay, so I'm having this thought that this person is racist. What is that thought? What is that bringing up for me? I'm wanting equality for all people. I'm wanting for people to just be seen for who they are. I'm wanting fair treatment for everybody. I'm wanting it for myself. I'm wanting for there to no longer be violence against people just because of their color of their skin, or because of their sexual orientation, or whatever it is that you're thinking about. You connect that in that way. You connect with your values. You have values for love and respect and compassion, and then that empowers you to then be able to express that anger in a way that would be more empowering, I think, for ourselves, and also more likely that other people might hear what's going on for us, and may be more likely to be able to shift what they're doing or saying.
Is there anybody else who would like to make a comment? Tara, are you? Yes. Tara's hand was up just right after Dave.
Sure. Yeah, I ditto what Dave said. Yeah, I believe that if we use anger or any emotion as just a compass to guide us to what is the unmet need that's screaming here to be met, to be recognized, to be addressed. We can think of anger as like a fire alarm, just to wake us up, to get self-connected on the level of needs. What are we needing? And I honestly think that the core of anger, lingering anger, is when we feel disempowered. If we feel disempowered on behalf of getting our need met, that's what creates the anger. When we can get self-connected on the level of needs, and then feel powerful enough and confident enough that we can go about getting our need met, I think that's what really dissipates the anger. Thanks.
So, and we can use language to do that. So we can find the language of connection, use words that create connection or exemplify connection. And once we do that, it's amazing how we no longer feel disconnected, how we feel connected to the solution rather than the issue and the problem. I know, Vanessa, you wanted to say something?
Yes, first two comments from our viewers. Christina Romina is saying happy birthday to Dave Rubin as well. So just wanted to get that birthday greeting. And George McQuaid says, how old is the person using that language? It's my new approach. So George, if you want to elaborate more, absolutely feel free. And before I get to my point, I was going to say that I know, because George is my partner, I know that he has really started to see that the way that we're all developmentally stuck, or a lot of us are developmentally stuck in a certain age, and certain things may trigger a young experience of that emotion. And, you know, I know sometimes when I feel like having a temper tantrum, or I want to yell or get violent, I feel 7. And I may say something, at least in my head, hopefully not out loud, or sometimes to George, where I'm coming from that young place that has some things that are still unresolved. And so I think that when we do have anger, there are different kinds of anger. It can be a personal anger. It can be an anger against the system. I'm angry that we live in a system of systemic injustice that treats some people as if their skin color, their orientation, any of their beliefs, anything about them is superior or inferior to any other group. That's, to me, what we would call like a righteous anger about a system of injustice. Then there's the anger when we feel personally affronted, and I think in many ways that is that stuckness, that if somebody says something that I think is mean or hurtful to me, it's because I'm still feeling that young place of vulnerability. Because if I'm not feeling that way, I'm going to say, wow, that person must be really unhealthy. That doesn't have to do with me. Or let's look at that. Are they angry about something and they're not conveying what they're actually angry about, but they're just striking out or being hurtful in some way? And so I'm able to be more neutral when I'm not in that young place. And I'm able to see it as a reflection of their own lack of self-esteem, because people with healthy, integrated self-esteem don't go around being hurtful, mean, or insulting to others. They deal with conflict in very different ways. So I just wanted to emphasize that. And the last thing I want to say is that I did this wonderful meditation the other day. I'm doing these guided meditations where they were really talking about when you're holding on to anger, that lingering anger Dave was mentioning, is that you're thinking things shouldn't be this way, and you're focused on that it should change, it's unfair, it shouldn't be, instead of surrendering to what is and changing, you know, the serenity prayer, that you can change some things, and other things you're surrendering that maybe right now that's not something I'm able to change. And surrendering to that will alleviate a lot of that tension, anxiety, and anger, rather than fighting against something you can't change.
So I want to make it very clear, yes, Tara, I see you, 1 second. I'd like to make it very clear that we're not saying there's anything wrong with anger. None of us are. I want to be really clarify that. We're not saying that you do not at all have any reason to be angry. The opposite, we think you do. What we're looking at today is solutions, how to address what's beneath and behind the anger, and how the language will fuel more anger and not the solutions. That's really what we're saying, that look at the language that you're using to feed the anger, and think of language that instead will help you to address the anger, to heal the anger, and go directly to the solution. So Tara, please come on. I know you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I'm really glad that you commented about that. Yeah, that anger, we're not saying that anger is not useful or good or taboo at all. In fact, I just want to distinguish proactive anger from reactive anger. Proactive anger is where you use it, like I was saying earlier, as a compass to guide you to an unmet need. That's how we can use our language. What is going on here? What am I needing? Or what is that person needing who's angry? If we can connect on that level, what's going on at the level of needs, because that is what communication is all about with ourselves and with others. It's about need fulfillment to support life. And when we can connect on that level, that will enliven us. I also want to say, piggyback on what Vanessa was saying about at an early age. What happens when we're young is we get trained, enculturated, modeled, programmed with being disempowered. If mommy and daddy are standing over little juniors saying, you make mommy and daddy so angry when you don't blah, 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 pick up your toys or whatever, it teaches little juniors that, oh, I'm the source of their experience. I'm the source. And then what follows that, therefore, is others must be the source of my experiences. So it creates dependency. It creates dependency. Now we're dependent on that and disempowerment. We're dependent on others so we can feel okay. And that, I think, is at the core. When we can take responsibility for our own experiences and know that others are responsible for their experience, then we can connect on the level that will enliven life and empower us. Thanks.
So what I'd like you all to address, everybody, all of us to address, is what does the person who's listening to this for the first time and has never considered this, how can they then take their power back? Because this is about empowering people. This entire webinar, the reason why I created it was about empowering people. And I cannot think of anything more empowering than language and the language that we choose. So I'd like each and every one of you to think and give people 2 or 3 things they can do immediately to resist the urge to curse, the urge to lash out verbally, and also the urge to be right. Because a lot of languaging I find it centers around the need to be right. So I would like you to think about that and then give some suggestions of what you think people immediately can start doing. Anyone whose hands up goes up first, I will call on you. Yes, Vanessa. Oops.
Part of why I put my hand up first is because I also wanted to read Christina's comment, which is that anger can energize us, that it's not a comfortable state. For sure, it can feel very agitating when we're in that state. I wanted to start off by saying that as a psychotherapist, one of our first, I wouldn't say rule because I don't believe in rules per se, but one of our values is that there are no shoulds, that you shouldn't be angry, you shouldn't feel that way. Oh, don't cry, don't be angry, don't anything. The more you resist any kind of feeling or tell yourself you're wrong, the more entrenched it's going to be and the more suffering you're causing yourself by judging yourself in that way. I definitely feel that the more we're open to that and to responding, the less power it has over us. Going into that, whatever that feeling, however uncomfortable it is, going into it further releases its power over us. We can't be afraid of it and it's not hovering over us. So I would say, in terms of Dorit's question, that the more I lean into that uncomfortable feeling, the more that I'm honoring myself by that feeling, with my self-love, with my compassion, being kind to myself, that I'm struggling with something. I may be angry, I may be hurt, I may be sad, whatever it is. And the more that I'm kind to myself, forgiving myself for feeling whatever it is I'm feeling, for being curious about it, the more I'm able to connect to this other person and see their woundedness. And when I see somebody else's woundedness, I don't have that desire to lash out because they may be suffering and struggling and having a hard time as well. And I don't feel like lashing out when I have that sense of our connectedness. I may want to set very firm boundaries and let them know that they violated my space, they've done whatever it is they've done. I want to have accountability and let them know it's not okay. But it takes the desire out when I insert that breath, that pause, that moment before responding that I'm filling with my own self-love, my own kindness and compassion to myself. For me, that's what curbs my urge to curse at somebody, to lash out, or to be right. And to find out that we may be misunderstanding each other, misinterpreting each other, and there may be something I'm overlooking, and we can find a way possibly where we can both talk to see a little bit more clearly each other's perspective that way.
And what word specifically would you suggest using to do that?
To connect to them or to ask them, I guess what I would say is I'm asking that, I don't know about a word, I'll have to think more about that, but a word of generosity, that I hope we can both be generous with each other to have this conversation for the highest good for both of us and to do no harm to either of us. So I would say generosity and compassion would be my top 2 words.
Next person, please. Your hand, please. Yes, Dave.
I like what you said, Vanessa. I like how I think part of what you were saying about getting connected with how the person is hurting or what pain that they're in, a component of it that I think is important is putting yourself in the other person's place and doing it in a way that really takes care of yourself. So the three things I heard you ask about were how we can resist the urge to curse, the urge to lash out, and the need to be right. So as far as cursing, my take on it is I don't have it meets my needs just fine if somebody uses a word and it uses a word that might be considered a curse word. If they use it in a way that just puts an exclamation point in what's going on for them, like I'm fucking excited. I think that's different than using curse words or any other words in a way to put somebody down or attack somebody or make them the enemy. Or to lash out at somebody. And I think when we're really stimulated about something, we really have this desire to express what's going on for us and to be right about, prove that we're right about the thing. So I think that challenge is to shift away from that. So I think the way to do that is to focus our attention again to feelings and needs. If we're getting stimulated, we probably need to take at least a moment to connect in with our own feelings and needs so we can be calm enough that we are in a space to hear the other person. And there may be times when we can't do this instantly, when we might need more of a break. Sometimes, like Vanessa said, just taking a moment and taking a deep breath can be enough. Other times, I think it can be a very powerful thing. I have found that when I've consciously started shifting my when I was really consciously trying to shift the way I communicate to a more compassionate way of communicating, and I was still getting very stimulated by things people said, and I couldn't talk or really connect with myself or the other person, it really helped me to just start recognizing when that's the case and just take a break. Saying I really need to just stop the conversation for a couple of minutes and we'll continue when I'm in a space to hear you, something like that. And then once you're in that space, focus on what's going on for that person. Put yourself in that person's place. What might be going on for that person? That's after you take sufficient care of yourself, so you're present and able to hear them.
Yes, Tara, I see you. I see you waving. Okay, come on board, Tara.
Yeah, you asked, what can people do? What's a practical thing that people can do immediately? I would say, honestly, I would love that everyone would learn the 4 little simple steps of nonviolent communication. Because what it does, it enables you to use language in a way that is self-responsible and is empowering. It takes out that whole finger pointing, you statements, you make me feel. It by using the steps, it enables you to take responsibility. When I experience this, I feel this way, and I identify with my need. And then you make a request. There's 4 steps: the observation, the feeling that happens when this observation is made, the needs underneath the feelings, and then the respectful, doable request about it. What can you respectfully ask on behalf of your needs? Getting out of the realm of, I like what you were mentioning about being right, getting out of completely the realm of right and wrong, good and bad, just not wrong making anything. Use everything as an opportunity to just get self-connected first and then other connected on the level of needs. And what can we do to serve life here? Thank you.
I would like to continue with that last phrase. What can we do to serve life?
Yes.
Is there anyone who would like to address that, please? You would unmute yourself first and then come on.
So I will just continue a little bit with that. That's what we can do to serve life, is to focus on the level of needs and what can we be in action on behalf of need fulfillment, ours and others. That's a real key focus point. Thank you.
So I will also comment on the need to serve life. I believe life is about constant evolution and growth. If you'd all mic yourselves, please, I would appreciate it. Thank you so much. So life is about constant evolution and growth. And what we need to do is look at our language and say, how does this serve my own evolution? How do I grow each time I use this terminology or this word, or how does it hinder my own growth? Do I find myself stuck in always going back to using these words, these phrases, these thought patterns? Or may I evolve from that? Is there a way that I can evolve from that? And what I was saying before is just simply substitute. From the beginning, I was saying that substitute with maybe words of poetry, words of beauty, words of calm. Use those words instead, because words do trigger the brain and it triggers the response in us. It's instantaneous. For example, if you feel that you're so triggered and you don't want to stop being triggered, but you on the another level you'd like to evolve from it, what I would suggest you do is quote Rumi. Find a Rumi quote and just immediately start quoting Rumi for no obvious reason, but just because of the words and the way he uses words and the words that have been translated from Farsi and the way it's used, the stream of the words, or from Hafiz or any of the Sufi masters or any of the monks like Thich Nhat Hanh, who is so invested in using the language of peace. So just use that language instead. I often think of Thich Nhat Hanh and how would he phrase this for himself, not for the other person, but for himself. And what language would he use? And he uses very specific language. And going to his retreats, because I was so into language and the power of language, I was so mesmerized by how limited his vocabulary was and how incredibly powerful that limitation gave him. It's almost like he expanded more into his own being and he's expanded more into the universe from doing that. So I am wondering if the panel would like to give us some example of themselves, how they've used language to expand more fully into a wider interpretation of themselves, or the opposite, to limit themselves. Anyone would like? Yes.
Thank you. I wanted to bring up a few viewer comments first, which is that Christina's pointing out there's a lot of misunderstanding out there, and that is for sure. I think most of the time when I do couples work, most of the time it's people are mad at their partner because of their interpretation of what they think the other person means, or what it would mean if they said it, to which they're bringing their own lens, their baggage, their history, their whole worldview, their hurts to it, and seeing it in that way. Or you're carrying around a woundedness and you see examples of people trying to wound you and you interpret it in that way. So I definitely agree with Christina. George McQuaid says we call them talking boundaries per the work of Pia Melody. Talking boundaries. I'd love to hear more about that, George, if you can. Talking boundaries seem like a great way to say where your limits are in terms of what you'll allow in, what you find comfortable. Christina says, nice midweek mindfulness lesson. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And for watching, Christina, we appreciate it. And David Wong, be impeccable with your words. 100%. I think that comes from the 4 agreements, which are so critical and such great ways to lead your life. So thank you for that, David. And I wanted to add that when we use, I'm going to talk for a moment to address Dorit's question, talk for a moment about the internal language that we have of how we speak to ourselves, because I feel that we have to address that in order to be fully congruent and be able to speak to others in the way that we want to be congruent with our beliefs. So when I say things to myself such as if I make a mistake and I say, oh, that was so stupid of me. How could I do that? Right there, what I'm saying is there's something deficient about myself that caused me to do this, and that I'm wanting to punish myself for having made a mistake. When I started looking at those ways in which I'm chastising myself for things and starting to look at the hurtful way that I'm using language to minimize and hurt myself, to punish myself, I started putting that pause in and saying, is this true? Is this accurate? Is it healthy? Is it helpful? Cognitive behavioral techniques. And when I started looking at that, I started realizing that I'm human, or as George McQuaid just said, we are perfectly imperfect. I'm perfect with my imperfections the way I was made. I make mistakes like every human. I'm allowed to. It doesn't make me somebody worthy of being insulted. It makes me worthy of having compassion for myself and forgiving myself for making those mistakes. And the word forgive is one that I use a lot with myself. When I make a mistake now, I acknowledge the mistake and then I say, I forgive myself. Forgive is one of the more powerful words that I've used for myself in being able to transcend that self-abusive language that also I feel makes me more negative and critical towards other people. And the more I forgive myself and I'm loving towards myself, the more I'm able to project that outwards and be able to engage with people in that way, and not in a more violent manner that's belittling or demeaning, as a seeping out or reflection of my own view of myself. And the last thing is, George McQuaid says, affirmations, I guess he's saying the talking boundaries, affirmations to reprogram those harmful thoughts creates a new truth in your mind too. Absolutely. Thank you for that, George.
And those affirmations are words. And this is what I was saying before, George. This goes back to that in order to make the change, we need to change the words that we use. So, for example, what Vanessa was just saying, if she says, oh, that was so stupid of me, very often that language is not even our own authentic language. It's what we heard. It's what we've taken from others, in our parents or caretakers or the society, what we hear in media. And if we start talking more authentically, which is one of the four agreements, yes, of being impeccable in our wording, if we start thinking, is this really me talking, or am I simply regurgitating what I've heard all my life, what I've been constantly bombarded with? It's important to relanguage ourselves and make the language that we use authentically ours. I have found that languaging myself is the same thing as dancing. I dance for me, and when I dance, it's my own movements. I'm not stealing somebody else's movement, except when I was a professional dancer, and then I had to do what the choreographer gave us, which I very often did not do. However, language is exactly that to me. It's a dance. So maybe you do 2 steps to the right, 2 steps to the left, and 4 forward and 10 back. And you just do not beat up on yourself, because if that's the language that you're used to hearing, is the language of beating up on yourself that you've heard constantly and you hear other people using. Maybe it's time to change the people you hang out with. Maybe it's time to stop listening to certain webinars and certain podcasts. Maybe you need to switch over to others that will encourage you and assist you in making these changes on a daily basis, because everything happens on a daily basis. Tara, you wanted to say something? Yes.
Yeah, I want to piggyback on both what you and Vanessa just said about, yeah, that inner self-talk that we all do. We have just been programmed, basically. And so, of course, we're going to default there. So when Vanessa was saying, if she does something and she has an internal voice of, oh, that was stupid, or, oh, I'll never get this, I'm such an idiot, or whatever. We will do that. And what I've been working on, and we will, it's just very human, because we've practiced it, and you get good at what you practice. So even though we know better, still, because it's become a kind of a habitual default, it will happen. It will happen. The key for me is to not make that wrong, not even make that wrong, and just say, okay, Thank you for sharing. And if I know that, for instance, say, my higher values, what I really make a stand for is living nonviolently. That matters to me. That I value that. If that's what really matters to me, I want to be in alignment with my highest values. And if I catch myself saying, "Oh, I'm a fraud," or "I just can't do that," whatever, I don't even make that wrong. I'm not violent to myself about being violent to myself, even at all. I don't want to be violent at all. I want to really live in alignment with my commitment to nonviolence. So I catch myself, I don't make it wrong. I say, I understand. It's just my default habit pattern. That's okay. And then I extrapolate that to everyone else. That's all that's happening with everyone else too. It's just their default. They can't help it. I say push the no wonder button. Push the no wonder button when someone defaults or yourself defaults, and then get back on the saddle of what is your greater stand, what you really value. That has been something that helps me.
What I learned the most from Don Luis Miguel. Yes, I see you, Dave. I see you. What I learned the most from Don Luis Miguel was do not make assumptions. That was my hindering point because I've been doing this since I was a child. And the one thing that always I seem to go back to is making assumptions. And I find every time I make assumptions, I get in trouble. And so I have been very vigilant about that, about making assumptions. And yet I hear myself sometimes starting to make an assumptions. Immediately I dance my way in and I just start either thinking something that I love from Rumi or Hafiz or a song that I really, really love, mainly usually songs by the Beatles. And I start doing that and immediately that goes, or by Queen. I happen to love Queen very much. But I, Dave, I know you wanted to say something.
Yes, thank you. I'm actually excited that to have a real live thing come up for me just during this webinar that I think could be, because I want to contribute to everyone's benefiting from this webinar and learning something from it. So the last time I spoke, I used the F word, and I got a message from Dorit saying that's not okay with her to use the F word in this in this panel. So I did what I got really good at. I did what I really got good at in my life, practicing learning the language that we've learned in our culture. And I started by saying, "Oh, what an idiot! I should have known to not use the F word. I could have said effing to express my point." And how could I have undermined rapport so much and just at very self-blaming, should have, shouldn't have kind of language. And then I shifted, and I'm actually have delayed really fully processing it so that I could kind of do it live. And I'm doing it right now, and I'm just realizing what came up for me is I felt sad and frustrated with myself because I want to contribute to life. I want to have rapport with everyone who I'm creating this panel with. I want to interact in a way that demonstrates respect and compassion. So even just saying that, just kind of connecting with these things, this is what we're talking about, serving life or connecting with life. By just connecting with what's really going on for me is enabling me to shift out of the space of self-blame and the pain that I was feeling. And now I feel empowered and much more present and grateful to have been able to experience this life and connect with myself and move past the painful feelings I was having.
What a perfect analogy of what we're teaching here. Thank you so much, Dave. And Dave, I don't know if you would say, I know for me this is true, that with that comes in a need, or not a need, but a desire to accept being vulnerable.
If I understand you correctly, you just bringing this up, it showed some vulnerability on my part. Is that what you're
That's what
referring
I'm
to?
asking. Yes, because for me, that's how I would have addressed it. Find a way to be vulnerable, to accept being vulnerable and being okay with it, which I love actually, because I find that I get deeper into the essence of who I am that way. And that's what I'm asking you. So is there
Yes.
an element of being vulnerable when we decide to change our language, that we open up ourselves to being vulnerable?
I absolutely think so. I think vulnerability is the key to connection. When we're vulnerable, it's so hard sometimes, I think, in our culture to express what's really going on for us, because we know we're in a culture with this focus on judging others as right or wrong or good or bad. So it can be very challenging to really tell people what's going on for us. And I find that when I started to shift this judgment, this into looking at what's serving life, looking at my feelings and needs, or looking at the feelings and needs of others, I am more able to express myself vulnerably, because I know that if judgment comes up for somebody, I can just kind of notice how that impacts me, and I can kind of connect with what's going on for the other person. And I think it's really enabled me to connect much more deeply with people.
So going from what you just said, and I thank you so much for actually bringing this up and using yourself as an example, because I think that that way we relate much more to people when they realize that we all are prone to actually go this route, and what to do when it happens. And you just showed what you did, which is what I really loved. And so would we all, each person here, let me know if they agree or disagree that in relanguaging ourselves, there's a strong element of vulnerability involved. I know Dave just addressed that. I'd like to hear from the other members of the panel here, and also from our audience as well. Tara, you didn't hear me, eh? I told
You cut out for a second.
Oh, did you call on me?
your hand. I'll repeat what I
I don't
asked,
know.
and then I will come back to you, Vanessa. I know you need to come in. I was asking if you, from what we've just experienced here just now, would you believe or not believe, or would you recommend or not recommend that in relanguaging ourselves, there's a strong element or not of vulnerability involved?
And you're asking me to comment or Vanessa? I'm just not sure about that. Sorry.
All of you.
Oh, got it. Okay. I saw Vanessa's hand, so go ahead, Vanessa.
Oh, I was going to say, go ahead. Okay, I want to read some comments. Dave got an outpouring of love for his for what he said, and I have to say, I was getting kind of emotional hearing you. I think because so many times I struggle with that immediate negative voice. How could I do that? I screwed up. I wanted to contribute, like you said. I wanted to connect with these people. I want to be seen as a good example. I want to be seen as somebody who can talk about this topic. All kinds of voices that I have that then have that negative voice. So I just applaud you so much for using yourself and role modeling for all of us how to use yourself as in a teachable moment, and how empowering it is for you to show your vulnerability and share that with us and show how something in real time affected you. I think there's no more powerful way to do it. That just was so awe-inspiring, the courage that you had in addressing that. And you have Christina, who's telling you it's okay, and George, who's saying, please don't shoot on yourself, and sending you hearts. And David is agreeing about the swear words. Melanie Shaw says, Dr. Sue Johnson calls it the tango dance we do with each other. I think tango is such an apt thing, because tango, unlike a lot of other dances that I've personally done, is so subtle in terms of how you have to pick up on each other's cues. And the more you're able to read those verbal and nonverbal cues, the more you're able to dance with somebody in a more fluid way. So I think that's a beautiful, beautiful metaphor. George says, I'm human and I'm fallible, I'm lovable, I'm worthy, talking about the affirmations, the positive things you say to yourself many times daily. affirmations to reprogram those harmful thoughts creates a new truth in your mind too, as well. Thank you for that. We have such great viewer comments today. I really appreciate the depth and the honesty that you're having and sharing that with us, where we can all be really honest with each other. And now to address Dorit's question, which I think I've now forgotten after reading all those comments. I'm so sorry.
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability, I think, is I remember a therapy client of mine came in the office one time. He was a Latino male, and he said it's very hard for him to be talking to a woman as his therapist who's got a master's level, and he did not have that level of education, and he felt one down, and he was in a culture that treated that men were better. And so it was very hard for him he was sharing how hard that was and what a struggle that was for him, and that he doesn't want to be weak. And I said, do you realize how powerful what you just said was? That you're admitting some things that are hard for you to say. That takes courage to be able to bring up your fears and your doubts and the things that make you uncomfortable. And when he looked at it like that he was able to reframe for himself that vulnerability takes power. To what Dave did took such courage and power to be able to own that and to know that you're not going to fall apart, you're not going to crumble, that your world is not going to end because you're admitting something uncomfortable or scary for yourself. And so I think that when we become aware of the strength and power of vulnerability, it does get easier and easier. And that comfort circle expands. And the only way to get outside it is to challenge it and to push it out. And things get easier and easier the more you have that practice. So I think vulnerability is one of our most powerful ways of loving ourselves, forgiving ourselves, and being able to connect with others.
Thank you. So we have exactly 1 minute left for each person before we wrap up. So I'm going to go through the panel. Tara, I saw your hand was up. So I'm going to start with you first, and I'm going to go to Dave. And then I will.
I don't know if I can do it in 1 minute, but I just want to say very quickly that, this is so fun and wonderful, and I've appreciated this. And that, when we are vulnerable, when we kind of push up against our default, and yet it takes strength. And just by doing it, as you saw with Dave, the example of Dave, just by doing it, all of a sudden things can move. It can actually start to move that stuck place in us, and a lot of power can come. Thanks.
So Dave, you're next. You're the hero of the moment, so please go ahead and speak.
Well, I'm noticing in the moment I'm not clear on exactly what I want to express, so I'll flow with it. Say the bottom line is, I think I invite you to consider this possibility of shifting judgment, just shifting from judging others as good or bad, or judging yourself as good or bad, to shifting to what you're like. And I encourage everyone to be patient with yourself, because these are all things that we've learned our whole life. We've learned to be really, as Tara said, we've learned to be really good at judging in the way of objectifying ourselves and others. So when you notice yourself doing it, that's great. Just that's actually the goal. The more you're noticing yourself doing it, then you have the opportunity to make that shift. And just remember, the goal is to just gradually learn to more effectively serve your life. And it's not wrong to forget or not remember to do something that you want to do. It's just an opportunity to continue to learn. Thank you.
And before I turn this over to Vanessa, who'll make also the announcement about next week, I would like to actually leave people with a gift of Louise Hay. So if you've not heard of Louise Hay, and if you have, I invite you to actually go back to Louise Hay and read her story first of all, and then read all of her affirmations and start using whichever one you find that works most adequately for you. And also The Seven Spiritual Laws of Success by Deepak Chopra. I strongly recommend those if you really want to look at your own languaging around you, how you go about eating, relating to yourself, bathing, sleeping. All of this language is involved in. We talk ourselves out of going to bed on time. We talk ourselves out of getting to bed, getting up later in the day. We talk ourselves about eating certain things or not. We talk ourselves about whether or not we're going to go somewhere or not. We use it for every language is completely and totally dominant in our lives, and it dominates everything we do. So I invite you all to please start paying attention to the language you use around each and every situation in your life while you're driving, for example. And I had some examples I wanted to bring up, which we don't have time now, but we will be revisiting this topic, as we will be all the other topics, because an hour is never enough to explore a human being's potential. So, Vanessa, you're up next, please.
Okay, couple comments. David Wong said, thanks for sharing the language of wellness with others. Appreciate that. Johnny Martinez says, I need all these vegan voices, and eating animals is not meat. Yes, absolutely. Agreed. Thank you, Johnny. So I just want to say that when I've had experiences when I've said I'm sorry and really acknowledged something to someone, it doesn't make things worse, or it doesn't make them more aware of things I've done. You know, we have this fear that if I acknowledge it, they'll have more attention on it. If I just don't say anything, they won't notice. No, they'll probably notice you're just not apologizing. I find, again, to use the hero of the day, Dave, that when we have those experiences, it's a moment that brings more closeness. When we have those little ruptures in lives and then have some kind of argument, let's say, or parent-child dispute or partners or whatever, when we talk about it, it gives us a chance for more closeness and more intimacy and knowing each other more. So I just think that when we stay open and vulnerable and willing to have those corrective emotional experiences, it can be so very powerful and create more intimacy, which to me is the point of life, of connecting and being intimate and having those loving relationships with people. So I wanted to bring up our next week's panel, which is Wednesday, August 19th at 12 p.m. Pacific time, When Silence Heals, which is a wonderful and brilliant next point for this webinar. So thank you all so very much for watching, and we will see you next Wednesday, same time. Thank you. Bye.